Story 1. I was driving back home to Arizona after spending a few days in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'd gone there to clear my head a bit, see some old places I used to love, just reset. On my last day, I posted a quick video on Instagram. Something dumb, just my coffee and the sunrise. A few hours later, I got a message from someone I hadn't talked to in years. Ryan. We went to high school together, hadn't really spoken since graduation, but we'd always followed each other on social media. He replied to my story and asked if I was still in town. I said I was just about to hit the road. He said he lived a little south of Santa Fe now, near a small town called Los Cerrillos, and that if I wasn't in a hurry, I should swing by. I didn't see why not. I didn't have a strict schedule. And honestly, the idea of seeing a familiar face after so long sounded good. So I punched his address into my GPS and started driving. The route took me down winding roads through low hills and scattered desert trees. The kind of empty space that makes you feel both peaceful and a little uneasy. His house sat on a quiet road, a small one-story place surrounded by brush and old fencing. It looked old, but not broken down. We just lived in, like it hadn't changed in a couple of decades. When I stepped onto the wooden porch, it creaked loudly beneath me, and before I could even knock, Ryan opened the door with a big grin on his face. He gave me a strong hug and pulled me inside like no time had passed. The place smelled like dry wood, dust, and something warm, maybe old leather or cedar. The living room was small but cozy. The couch cushions looked worn, the rug faded, the coffee table scratched up with age, and there was an old record player in the corner, still playing soft blues when I walked in. We caught up over whiskey, laughing about old classmates, dumb things we did as teenagers, and how strange it felt to be in our 30s now. One drink turned into 2, then 3. It was that kind of evening, the kind where time folds in on itself, and you forget about the clock completely. I don't remember what time it was when I realized how drunk I was, but I knew I wasn't driving anywhere. Ryan offered for me to crash there, and I said sure. I figured I'd sleep on the couch, but he shook his head and told me he had a spare room down the hall. Nothing fancy, he said, but better than cramping your back on that thing. I didn't argue. He ordered some food. Chinese, I think. And after eating, he led me down a short hallway. The walls had some old black and white photographs, probably family, and I remember passing a mirror that looked a little warped, like the glass had bowed over time. The guest room was small. I remember a bed with a wooden frame, a small nightstand, and some faded curtains that barely kept the moonlight out. There was a closet on the far wall, its door closed. I didn't think much of it. The air inside the room was still, like it hadn't been disturbed in months. You know that feeling when a room has been sealed off too long? That. I was exhausted and buzzing from the drinks, so I collapsed onto the bed without bothering to change. My head spun slightly, but it felt warm and safe in a strange way. Ryan was an old friend. I wasn't in a strange motel. I wasn't alone. That's what I told myself. But as I drifted off, I remember thinking how quiet it was. The house didn't creak much despite its age. The silence wasn't peaceful, though. It was thick, like something was listening. I brushed it off as a side effect of the whiskey, turned over, and let myself fall asleep. Looking back now, I think that silence was the first warning. But I was too tired to notice, too trusting, too far from home. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still dark. That kind of dark, where the only light comes in slivers through old blinds, casting soft gray stripes across the floor and the edge of the bed. My mouth was dry, and my head was foggy from all the whiskey. I sat up a little, trying to adjust to the stillness in the room. At first, nothing felt wrong, just groggy and a little nauseous. But then I noticed it. In the far corner, just to the left of the closet door, something looked off. There was a shape there. A tall, dark outline, like a coat or something hanging on a rack. But Ryan said the room was barely used. I didn't remember seeing anything there before I passed out. At first, I thought maybe it was just a coat. Maybe he did have a rack in here, and I just missed it. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized the shape didn't hang like fabric. It didn't sway. It didn't have folds. It looked solid, like someone standing there. I stared at it for what felt like forever, my pulse slowly building in my ears. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light. Maybe the way the moonlight hit the edge of the closet gave it that look. I turned away, trying to ignore it, but I couldn't help glancing back again. Still there, unmoving, watching. I pulled the covers up higher and squeezed my eyes shut. My breathing slowed, but my heart didn't. I don't know when I drifted off again, but it wasn't peaceful. My dreams were broken and shallow, filled with flashes of dark corners and locked doors. When I woke up the second time, it was early morning. The sky was gray-blue, and the first birds were chirping somewhere outside. But what snapped me awake wasn't sunlight or sound. It was a feeling, a shift. I looked at the corner. The shape was gone. Just an empty space now. I sat up fast, maybe too fast, because the room tilted for a second. My stomach churned, not just from the hangover, but from this low, twisting dread that crept up my spine. I scanned the room. Nothing in the closet, nothing on the floor, nothing that could have cast that shadow. I got out of bed and walked straight to Ryan's room. He was out cold, snoring lightly, completely unaware. I shook his shoulder hard. It took a few tries, but he finally blinked awake, groaning and confused. "The corner," I said, my voice barely steady. There was something in the corner of the guest room. He frowned at me like I was still drunk. "What do you mean by something?" "A coat," I said. I thought it was a coat, but it looked like someone standing there, and then it was gone. He rubbed his face, trying to wake up fully. "I don't even own a coat rack," he said. "That room's empty, always has been." I stared at him, hoping he'd smile and say he was messing with me, but he didn't. "Come look," I said. We walked back to the room together. I pointed to the exact spot. Right there. It was right there. Ryan just stood there, blinking at the empty space. He opened the closet door, looked behind it, and looked around the room. "Man, you sure you didn't just dream it?" he asked. "I was awake," I said. "I woke up and saw it. Then I woke up again, and it was gone." My voice was quieter now, but shaking. He nodded slowly, then looked around again. The silence in that room felt heavier now, like it was holding its breath. "Let's check the house," he finally said. We searched everything. The back door was still locked, no windows open, no signs anyone had come or gone, no footprints on the porch, nothing out of place. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, that I'd had too much to drink, and my brain invented a shadow where there was none. But that feeling, the one that woke me up, that sick sense that something was just wrong, never left. As soon as the sun was fully up, I grabbed my keys, thanked Ryan for the hospitality, and got out of there. The whole drive back, I kept replaying it in my mind. That shape, that stillness, that vanishing. I don't think Ryan was messing with me. He never brought it up again. And honestly, I don't want to either. Because deep down, I'm not sure I imagined it. I think something was there, watching, and it decided to leave before sunrise. Story 2. This happened 2 summers ago when I went on a short trip with my parents and my best friend, Alyssa. We live in Portland, and the plan was to drive down through the Oregon forests and spend a few days camping before stopping at a small theme park near the coast. We didn't book anything in advance, which was probably our first mistake. We figured summer weekdays wouldn't be too crowded. But when we arrived at the area near the park, all the official campsites were fully booked. There was some big regional soccer event that weekend, and apparently every family with a tent had shown up. My dad called around, but everything nearby was packed or way too expensive. So after a while, we gave up on trying to find a campsite with showers and electricity and decided to do something a little more adventurous. Wild camping isn't totally legal in all parts of Oregon, but there are certain nature reserves where it's allowed if you're careful. So my dad set the GPS to a parking area inside a public forest reserve, about 20 minutes from the theme park. When we got there, it looked pretty peaceful. Just a wide gravel lot surrounded by dense trees and ferns. No signs of rangers or restrictions. There were a few other hikers packing up their gear, and we asked one woman if it was okay to stay there for the night. She said she'd camped there a few times and it was fine as long as we were respectful and quiet. So we set up the tents right there at the edge of the lot, close to a trailhead that led into the woods. My parents took the larger tent, and Alyssa and I had a smaller one just a few feet away. It wasn't the prettiest spot in the world, but there was something cozy about being surrounded by forest and fresh air. Plus, we were only staying one night. After struggling with the tent poles and tarp for way too long, Alyssa and I finally got our tent ready. We made it as comfy as we could, laid out our sleeping bags, brought in snacks, and played some videos on her phone while the sky slowly darkened. Around 10:30 p.m., the last of the hikers drove off, and suddenly it felt very quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you more aware of every little sound. There was one car left parked at the far end of the lot. A beat-up old sedan that looked like it hadn't moved in days. We had noticed it earlier but hadn't seen anyone near it. It just sat there under the trees, its windows dusty, and its back seat covered by a blanket or sheet. Something about it made me uneasy, but I didn't want to say anything and freak Alyssa out. Around 11 o'clock, we both agreed to get some rest, since we planned to hit the theme park early the next morning. My parents were already asleep by that point. Alyssa and I were still scrolling through TikTok inside our tent, whispering and laughing at dumb videos when we suddenly heard a loud metallic sound from outside. It was sharp and sudden, like a shovel or pipe hitting the gravel. We both froze and looked at each other. I whispered, "Did you hear that?" And she nodded, eyes wide. We didn't move. We didn't unzip the tent or look through the mesh window. We just sat there, completely still. Then we heard it again, less loud this time, but followed by a dragging noise and the sound of a car trunk slamming shut. It came from the direction of that abandoned-looking car. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend of mine who lived about 30 minutes away. I told him where we were camping, just in case. He replied almost instantly and asked if we were near the beach trail. When I said yes, he told me that the area had a bad reputation. He said people sometimes did sketchy stuff there. His words, not to be out after dark. Suddenly, that sinking feeling in my stomach got worse. I didn't want to scare Alyssa more than she already was, so I didn't read the message out loud. We waited, listening, our bodies tense under the sleeping bags. For a few minutes, everything went quiet again. No cars, no footsteps, just the sound of the wind moving softly through the trees. But that silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something was waiting. About 10 minutes passed after that metallic noise and the sound of the trunk slamming shut, and things started to feel calm again, or at least calm on the outside. Inside the tent, Alyssa and I were frozen in place, both of us listening so hard that every rustle of the trees felt like a scream. We didn't speak. We barely even breathed. I think we were both hoping it was over, that whatever had happened was nothing, or that the person had just left. And for a moment, I thought that might be true. But then, out of nowhere, the silence broke. A scream. Not just any scream.it was the loudest, most chilling scream I've ever heard. It came from the woods behind the parking lot. A man's voice, raw and panicked, like someone being hurt or hunted or something worse. I grabbed my phone and texted my mom in a panic. She didn't respond, so I called her instead. After a few rings, she finally picked up, groggy. I asked if she'd heard it and she said no. She and my dad had been asleep. She told me it was probably an animal or something, not to worry and to just try and sleep. But there was no way either of us was sleeping after that. We were both fully awake now, our hearts racing. Then, like things weren't already bad enough, we heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching on the gravel just outside our tent. At first, they were faint, like someone was trying to be quiet, but you can't really hide the sound of shoes on gravel. We both sat up straight in our sleeping bags, staring at each other, mouths slightly open, eyes wide. I quickly turned off my phone screen so it wouldn't cast any light. We listened. The footsteps moved past our tent, toward my parents' tent, then circled back around toward our car. Then they stopped. There was no talking, no movement, no indication of who it was or what they were doing. Just stillness. I held my breath so long I felt lightheaded. Alyssa clutched my arm and didn't let go. We didn't dare peek outside. Something about the way those footsteps moved didn't feel like a hiker or a lost camper. It felt intentional. Like whoever it was knew exactly where we were and what they were doing. Then, headlights. Bright white beams lit up the trees around us and shone straight through the fabric of our tent. I almost jumped. A car had pulled back into the parking lot. It had to be the same car as earlier. The lights moved slowly, scanning the area. I could hear the low rumble of the engine idling. Alyssa and I dropped down flat, hoping they wouldn't see our silhouettes. Then we heard the driver's side door open, slam shut, and the car peeled out, sped away, like someone was fleeing. I lay there, heart pounding in my throat, trying to process what just happened. Then, less than 5 minutes later, another car arrived. But this one had a different sound, a more familiar sound. It was a police cruiser. We could hear the distinct sound of the engine and the light crunch of its tires as it rolled in slowly. We didn't see or hear any shouting, just the quiet movements of officers stepping out. They didn't knock on our tent or speak to us. Maybe they were just checking the area, or maybe they were already looking for someone. Either way, the timing was too perfect to be random. Alyssa and I stayed curled up in the tent for a while, but neither of us felt safe anymore. Eventually, we got up and quietly slipped into the car, locked the doors, and sat there in the front seats just watching the tree line. I stayed awake until nearly 5 a.m. The sky started to lighten and birds started chirping again, but the fear didn't really go away. Sometime around sunrise, we went back to the tent, too tired to function. We finally fell asleep out of pure exhaustion. When we woke up a few hours later, I told my mom everything. She looked really serious, then admitted something that made my stomach drop. She'd heard the footsteps too. And not just that. When they were near her tent, she heard breathing. Heavy, deliberate breathing. The kind you only hear in horror movies when someone's standing way too close. My dad slept through the whole thing, but the rest of us packed up and got out of there as fast as we could. We still went to the theme park later that day, but I couldn't stop thinking about that scream, those footsteps, and the person circling our tent like they were deciding something. I later looked up the area and found news stories about a man stabbed in the woods not far from there, and 2 others who'd gone missing near that same beach. They were never found. I still wonder if we were being watched, and if someone had come just a little closer, maybe I wouldn't be here telling this story. Story 3. This happened when I was 6 years old, but it's one of those memories that never faded with time. If anything, it got clearer as I got older, because I never found an explanation for it. I grew up in a small town in Missouri, just me, my older brother Jack, and our parents. Jack is 2 years older than I, so he was 8 when this happened. We shared a bedroom upstairs, while our parents slept downstairs. Our house wasn't big, just a modest 2-story place with creaky floors and those thin old doors that didn't block much sound. Our bedtime was 8:30 sharp. My dad was strict about rules, especially on school nights, and we both knew better than to test him. That night, I remember falling asleep quickly, like usual. I was the kind of kid who passed out the second my head hit the pillow, but sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not slowly, not groggy. I just opened my eyes and felt wide awake. Jack was leaning over me, shaking my shoulder gently. His face was tense, and he whispered, "Shh, just listen." I didn't understand at first. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, but then I heard it too. It was a voice, a woman's voice, soft and quiet, like someone whispering from far away, and she was calling our names. Jack, Mikey. At first I thought it was our mom. That's the only explanation that made sense. But something about it felt wrong. The way she said our names didn't sound like her. It was almost too soft, too careful, like someone trying not to wake the whole house. I started to get up, ready to open the door and go downstairs, but Jack grabbed my arm and shook his head. "Don't," he said. "That's not Mom." I remember getting annoyed at him. I told him to stop trying to scare me, but he looked serious. Really serious. "Just listen again," he whispered. So I did. I went to our bedroom door and put my ear against it. The voice was still there, clearer now. "Jack. Mikey." It sounded like it was coming from the bottom of the stairs, just past the door that separated the upstairs from the main floor. I whispered, "It's Mom." But Jack didn't respond. He just kept watching me with this nervous look on his face. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe curiosity, or maybe I still didn't believe Jack. But I slowly unlocked the door that led to the stairway. I opened it just a crack, just enough to peek through. That's when I saw her. A figure stands at the very bottom of the stairs. A woman. She wasn't moving, just standing there, looking up. The hallway light behind her was off, so I couldn't make out her face. But she saw me. I know she did. Because the second my eyes met that shape, she spoke. "Hi, sweetie. Come down." My whole body locked up. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there frozen for what felt like forever before I slammed the door shut and locked it again. I ran back into the bedroom and locked that door too. Jack was already hiding under the blanket, and I crawled in next to him, shaking. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't have to. We both knew something was off. After a few minutes of silence, we made a plan. We'd scream on the count of 3 to wake our parents. So we did. We stomped on the floor and screamed our lungs out until we heard them running up the stairs. Our dad banged on the locked door, yelling at us, confused and a little angry. But once we opened it and he saw the look on our faces, his expression changed. My mom rushed over and hugged us, asking what was wrong. We both told her what we saw, what we heard. She looked pale. My dad didn't say much. He just went downstairs while my mom stayed with us. We begged her not to leave. I remember her holding us tightly and telling us we were brave. But when we asked if it was her voice, she shook her head. "No," she said. "I was asleep." I'll never forget the way she looked when she said that. Like she was trying to stay calm, but underneath, she was just as scared as we were. After we told our parents what happened, I remember the mood in the house shifting. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, heavy, like everyone was thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it out loud. My dad didn't come back upstairs right away. He was down there for a while, probably walking through every room, checking the doors, maybe even looking out the windows. My mom stayed in our room, sitting between Jack and me on the floor. She was trying to keep us calm, rubbing our backs and telling us everything was fine now. But her voice didn't match her eyes. She looked worried, like really worried. I asked her again if it had been her voice calling us, and she said no. She said she'd been asleep the whole time and hadn't even gotten out of bed until she heard us scream. She looked me straight in the eyes when she said it, and I believed her. I think Jack already did. Eventually, my dad came back upstairs. He said he didn't see anything. No one in the house, no signs of a break-in. He tried to brush it off, saying maybe we'd had a nightmare or just got spooked by a shadow. But he didn't sound convinced, not really. And later, I realized something. That night was the first time he ever told us to lock our bedroom door. He never used to say that. In fact, he was usually the one who got annoyed when we locked doors in the house. But after that night, it became a quiet rule. If we were upstairs and going to bed, we locked the door. No questions. I didn't sleep much that night. I think I dozed off eventually, but every little creak or whisper of wind made my heart jump. Jack stayed up even longer, I think. He was always the protector between us, even though he was just a couple of years older. The next morning, everything felt weird. The house was normal. Sunlight coming through the windows, coffee brewing in the kitchen, cartoons on the television. But none of us really said much about what happened. My parents didn't bring it up again, and Jack and I didn't either. It was like we were pretending it hadn't happened, even though all of us knew it had. A few days later, I overheard my parents talking in the living room when they thought Jack and I were asleep. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught pieces. My mom said something about knowing who it might have been, and my dad told her to drop it and don't scare the boys. That stuck with me. I didn't know what they meant, but the way they said it made me feel like there was something they weren't telling us. Years went by, and we never saw anything like that again. No more voices, no more figures at the bottom of the stairs. But the memory never went away. Not for me, and definitely not for Jack. Even now, we both still lock every door before bed. We double-check the locks on windows. We both have security cameras at our houses, even though we live in safe neighborhoods. It just stays with you. When I was in college, I brought it up to my mom again during a dinner visit. I asked her straight out if she ever figured out who it was that night. She just looked at me for a moment, then smiled like I'd asked something silly. It was probably just a dream, she said. But her eyes did that thing again. The same thing they did that night. Like she knew more than she was saying. I didn't push her. I just let it go. But here's the part that really sticks with me. The thing that makes my stomach twist every time I think about it. That voice, whoever it was, knew our names. Both of them. Jack and Mikey. It wasn't some stranger calling, "Hey kid," or "Is someone up there?" Number. It was personal. Familiar. Like whoever it was had been watching us for a while. Or maybe they'd been in the house before. Maybe they were even in the house that night. I'll never know for sure. But Jack was right from the beginning. Whatever you hear in the dark, whatever sounds like someone you trust, don't open the door. Story 4. This happened when I was 17, back when I was still in high school and didn't have my own car. I lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside Charleston, South Carolina, with my mom. She was a single parent, always juggling work and life the best she could, and she trusted me enough to go out with friends as long as I kept her posted. That night, my friend Kayla had invited a few of us over to her house while her parents were out. Nothing wild, just 5 girls hanging out, eating snacks, playing music in the backyard. At least that's how it started. After a couple of hours, some guys from our school showed up, uninvited, or at least unannounced to me. One of them was someone I had a messy past with, and I really didn't want to deal with the tension. I didn't cause a scene, didn't make it awkward. I just told Kayla I was heading out. She tried to apologize through texts as I left, saying she hadn't meant to make things uncomfortable, but I was already walking. It was around 11:30 at night. The walk to my house was about 20 minutes. Not too bad, especially since we lived in a relatively safe area. I had walked it before during the day. At night, it was a little different. Streets that felt peaceful in the daylight suddenly felt stretched out and too quiet. I kept my phone in my hand, music in one earbud, and started walking at a steady pace. About 5 minutes in, I noticed footsteps behind me. Not fast, not right up close, just there. At first, I thought it was someone else out for a walk or heading home. That made sense, right? It wasn't super late yet, but the steps never got farther away, and they never passed me. Every time I slowed down just a little, they stayed the same pace. I turned to glance over my shoulder and saw a man. He looked middle-aged, wearing a hoodie with the hood up, and had his hands tucked in the front pocket. He was smiling. Just smiling. Not in a friendly way. Just a little too much. He said, "How are you doing tonight?" in this overly casual tone. I mumbled, "Hi," and turned back around, picking up my pace just a little. I didn't want to be rude or make things worse. My heart was starting to beat faster, but I kept telling myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was just being nice. I kept walking. A couple more minutes passed. I turned again. He was still there, still smiling, still keeping pace, not getting closer, not backing off, just enough to stay with me. I started texting Kayla, telling her there was a weird guy following me. I didn't want to sound dramatic, but something just felt off. The air felt different, heavy. And then he spoke again. "Nice night for a walk, huh?" I said, "Yeah," without turning around. That's when I really started to feel afraid, because I realized no one else was out. No other cars. No porch lights are turning on. Just us. He and I alone on a long, quiet street. I picked up my pace again, trying not to make it obvious that I was trying to get away. I thought about calling someone, but I was scared that if I pulled the phone to my ear, he'd take that as a sign I was panicking, that maybe it would make things worse. Then he said something that chilled me. "I've seen you before. You live near the elementary school, right?" My whole body froze for a second. I didn't answer. I just turned around to face him. He stopped walking, still smiling like it was a game. That smile didn't look friendly anymore. It looked wrong, like he was enjoying the fear. I said, "Leave me alone," and started to run. I don't know how fast he ran, or if he chased me for more than a few seconds. All I know is I heard his footsteps pick up behind me, and I started screaming. Loud, like lungs burning, throat aching, kind of screaming. "Help! Someone help me!" I didn't care how late it was. I wanted every house on that street to turn its lights on. I heard him shout something like, "Shut up!" before he ran off into the dark. I didn't stop until I saw headlights. My friend Jake had driven out after Kayla told him what was happening. I jumped in the car, shaking. He locked the doors and drove me home. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. When Jake dropped me off at home that night, I was still shaking. My mom wasn't home yet. She told me earlier she might be out late, and she wasn't answering her texts or calls. I didn't want to be alone. After what had just happened, there was no way I was staying in that house by myself, even for a minute. So I asked Jake if he could come inside, just for a while. He didn't even hesitate. I think he knew from the look on my face that I was still scared out of my mind. We went upstairs to my room and just sat there for a bit, not saying much at first. Eventually, we started talking. About the school, about the people we both knew, even about the awkward situation with Kayla earlier. It was kind of comforting, slipping into a normal conversation like nothing had happened. But even while we were laughing and trying to act normal, I couldn't relax. I kept glancing out the window, checking the driveway, the shadows in the trees, the street out front. I just wanted to be sure he hadn't followed me. Everything stayed quiet for a while, and for a second I thought maybe the worst was over. Maybe he'd just been some random creep who got scared off by me screaming. But around 1 a.m., we heard something. It wasn't loud, just a faint crunching sound from outside. Jake stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. We both went still. Then we heard it again. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Circling the side of the house. I reached over and turned off the lamp in my room, and we both crawled over to the window that overlooked the backyard. The motion sensor light on the side of the house flicked on, casting harsh white light over the grass and the back fence. But we didn't see anything, just the empty yard. Then the gate creaked open. My mom never used the backyard gate when she came home. She always came through the front. That's when I knew it wasn't her. I pressed myself back from the window, heart pounding, trying not to make a sound. Jake mouthed, "Stay low," and I nodded. We listened. No voices. Just the faint sound of someone walking slowly through the grass. Then the footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything was dead silent. And then a voice, clear, calm, and way too close, said, "I see you up there." I felt the air leave my lungs. Jake stood up fast and yelled through the closed window, "We're calling the cops, you freak!" He grabbed his phone and actually did it, while I sat frozen, still staring at the backyard. The footsteps didn't start again. We didn't hear anyone run. But by the time the police showed up about 10 minutes later, the yard was empty. They searched around with flashlights, looked for footprints, and checked the gate. They said the latch had been opened. Not broken, just unlatched from the inside, like someone had been trying to move quietly. They took our statements and drove around the block a few times. One of the officers stayed parked outside for a couple of hours, just in case. My mom got home not long after that. I'd never seen her look so scared. She kept apologizing, over and over, even though none of it was her fault. The next morning, she called my uncle, who was good with tools and tech. By the end of the weekend, We had cameras on every side of the house. Big, obvious ones. We wanted anyone coming near the place to know they were being watched. I didn't walk anywhere alone after that, not even during the day. I didn't even like being in the backyard by myself, especially at night. My mom noticed how nervous I was and eventually decided to move. It took a few months, but we sold the house and found a place across town, closer to her job and in a busier neighborhood. I haven't seen that man again. I never found out who he was or how he knew where I lived. But sometimes, when it's late and I'm alone, I still hear his voice in my head. Calm, cold. I see you up there. And I wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't screamed? If Jake hadn't shown up? If I'd been completely alone? I don't think I ever want to know.